Hurricane Matthew leaves more than 800 dead in Haiti. Communities are crushed and there are fears of cholera in the aftermath. The storm winds are now heading up the east coast of the USA and could head inland at any time.
Also tonight, in hospital, a thumbs up from UKIP's Stephen Woolfe, but the denial of a punch-up from his fellow MEP.
It was a tussle. He came to me and it was an embarrassing handbags at dawn tussle.
The pound slides sharply on economic concerns and a computer-driven flash crash.
And Brian booms his delight at receiving an OBE from the Queen.
I think that anything in life is possible, and anyone who turns down awards from the Queen, they need to kick up the derriere.
This is the ITV Evening News with Alistair Stewart and Ranveer Singh.
Good evening. The death toll inflicted on Haiti by Hurricane Matthew could rise sharply. More than 800 have already died, but the disruption of water supplies and public sanitation brings a fresh fear, a rapidly spreading cholera epidemic among the tens of thousands left homeless.
It is a bitter blow for the impoverished Caribbean nation, which is still struggling to recover from the earthquake back in 2010. The hurricane itself is now barrelling along the east coast of America, threatening to wreak more damage. Our correspondent Martin Geiser has the latest on this deadly storm.
It's 3 days since Hurricane Matthew struck Haiti, but only now is the real impact becoming clear. Hundreds are dead, and whole communities have been levelled by the storm. Once again, nature has delivered a brutal punishment to some of the poorest people on Earth. The wounds of a massive earthquake here 6 years ago have yet to heal. Tens of thousands still have no homes, and now this. I need medicine, says this woman. My son and I are sick. It's been almost 3 days since I was injured, and we still have nothing. Some help is getting through, but the United Nations believe there are more than 250,000 people still in need of assistance. Disease is often the second wave of a disaster, and cholera can thrive in these conditions. There's little medics can do. Hospitals have been left without power, and vital supplies are running low. There's no water, says this Red Cross worker. We can't help the people. There's no food either. Over the past week, Hurricane Matthew has lost none of its intensity. This picture from the International Space Station shows the scale of the storm. A research plane flew through the hurricane today to measure its power as it barreled up the Florida coast. In contrast to Haiti, South Florida seems to have escaped remarkably lightly. Hurricane Matthew passed about 30 miles offshore overnight, so this part of the state woke up to a mess, but no serious damage. It is skimming the coastline as it goes. Some places did feel the impact today. This was Daytona Beach near Orlando. The warnings are still in place.
This is still a really dangerous hurricane, that the potential for storm surge, flooding, loss of life, and severe property damage continues to exist, and people continue to need to follow the instructions of their local officials over the course of the next 24, 48, 72 hours. The north of Florida, Georgia and South Carolina are on alert for more of this or worse. Matthew may still make landfall. This emergency is not over yet. Well, the eye of the hurricane is now just past Daytona Beach. It's about 150 miles north of here, and it is still offshore, and that makes a difference. About 40 miles or so between the eye and the coastline can be the difference between 90-mile-an-hour gusts and 150 miles an hour or more. There are projections it'll hit land, possibly in Georgia, possibly tomorrow, but Matthew has followed an erratic path so far. This place, Palm Beach, extremely lucky. Haiti, catastrophically unlucky. Communities to the north of here are just waiting and praying that they don't take a direct hit.
Martin, thank you.
The UKIP MEP, accused of hitting colleague Stephen Woolf, today denied any punches were thrown. Mike Hookham, a former commando engineer, admitted there'd been a scuffle in the European Parliament yesterday, but described it as handbags at dawn.
Mr Woolf has been told that he will be kept in hospital for a further 48 hours. From Strasbourg, here's our political correspondent, Carl Dinnen.
Stephen Woolf is still in a French hospital this evening, although his colleagues say he's sick of croissants and wants to come home. Mr Woolf had collapsed yesterday following an altercation with a fellow MEP, Mike Hookham, who today gave his version of what happened after they got into an argument.
He stood up then and said, well, if it's going to take this tone, we need to take it outside the room, mano il mano. Those are the words he used, mano il mano. He gets up and starts to walk out the room, taking his jacket off. I have to say, quite strongly, there was no punches thrown. I never hit him. He never hit me.
How did the tussle start then?
It was a tussle. He came to me, and it was an embarrassing handbags at dawn tussle.
Nonetheless, Mr Woolf later went on to have 2 seizures while medical staff worked on him in the European Parliament. Nigel Farage, who visited Mr Woolf in hospital yesterday, has launched an internal investigation.
Well, there was a nasty altercation between 2 guys. You know, the rights and wrongs of this, the blame game, it should not be attributed to anybody at the moment. I've launched an investigation. 2 senior party officers will take witness statements from everybody inside and outside that room.
Outside the party, none of this looks very good. Although, after visiting Stephen Woolf in hospital, one of his colleagues suggested it might not be all that damaging.
As we've discovered many times with UKIP, we are a little bit Teflon, aren't we? So things get thrown at us and it seems to bounce off.
You've thrown this one yourselves.
We often throw things at ourselves, don't we?
Indeed. All this happened following another self-inflicted blow, the resignation of Diane James as leader after just 18 days. Stephen Woolf had hoped to replace her. Whether he is even allowed to stand in the contest may not depend on the investigations being carried out by both UKIP and the European Parliament itself. Now, Stephen Woolf has sent Mike Hookham a conciliatory email extending the hand of friendship from his hospital bed here. Whether that is enough to keep him in the leadership race remains to be seen. If it isn't, his many supporters in the party will be unhappy, and I suspect that the kind of personal animosities which got UKIP into this mess in the first place will linger on.
Indeed. Carl Dinnen, thank you.
The Chancellor has insisted the underlying UK economy is strong, despite a sudden flash crash in the value of the pound overnight. Within minutes, sterling plunged by 6 to 7% before making a partial recovery. It's thought Brexit jitters may have been amplified by an oversensitive computer programme. Our business editor Joel Hills has more.
Strong economies have strong currencies, but since the referendum, the pound has slumped. Overnight, it dropped quite suddenly in value before recovering slightly. A computer glitch the Bank of England is investigating.
I was quite surprised, really, I suppose, but the sentiment around the currency has been pretty negative of late, and markets are very volatile, so it's not entirely unheard of. But having said that, it is quite unusual to see these sorts of moves in the UK.
The pound fell sharply when Britain voted to leave the European Union on June the 23rd. The day after the referendum, £1 was worth $1.32, the lowest level in 31 years. Since then, the currency has remained weak. But last night, it fell abruptly to $1.18 before rallying a few minutes later. The Chancellor has been in the United States trying to reassure everyone that the future is bright post-Brexit. A flash crash doesn't help.
We can expect a period when there is some turbulence in the markets in response to things that are happening and speculation that's going on. What really matters here is that the fundamentals of the UK economy are strong.
Philip Hammond also intends to restart the sale of the taxpayers' stake in Lloyds Banking Group, although to investors, not the public. We spent £20 billion saving this bank from oblivion in 2008.
Getting back every penny of taxpayers' money that was used to bail this bank out 8 years ago would undoubtedly be quite some achievement. But if the Chancellor wants to send out a clear message of confidence in Britain's economic prospects going forward, you may think he'd be better off holding on to shares in Lloyds rather than selling them. Since the referendum, the economy has actually performed rather well, but the value of the pound is the closest thing Britain has to a share price, and it's down. Investors are clearly anxious about what happens next. Joel Hills, ITV News.
US Secretary of State John Kerry told Russia it owes the world an explanation for repeated airstrikes on hospitals in Aleppo. At least 20 people died in the latest attack, and Kerry said it begged for a war crimes investigation. All this week, ITV News has been chronicling the daily struggle for life in Aleppo and the children caught up in the deadly conflict.
Tonight, we have the story of 9-year-old Sedra Japal. She and her brother were hit by a barrel bomb as they brought bread for their family. Her brother was killed, and although Sedra survived, she lost an arm. Emma Murphy now with the latest in our series, Aleppo Under Siege.
It doesn't seem to matter where you grow up. A few sneaked minutes on a mobile phone are always a delight. And yet for this generation of Syria's children, the chance of a carefree childhood was lost as they were born. Children like Sedra, 9 years old and bearing the scars of the shrapnel which ripped into her face, tore off her arm and killed her 7-year-old brother. They were walking home with bread. She doesn't speak of what happened, but her eyes say more than any words could. What a difference from the little girl in the sparkly dress, who would share her pink sunglasses with the younger brother she would soon lose. Sedra's doctors have done what they can, but she's trapped in Aleppo and care is limited. We don't actually have a joint to work with, her doctor explains. She'll need a special prosthetic because of that, and they're expensive.
طبعا هون بسبب ضعف الامكانيات ما بنحسن كنا ننسق نحول تركيا لحالات البتور مشان تركيب الاطراف لكن عند تسكير الحدود وصعوبه الحدود فالمرضى كثير ما بنحسن نحولهم. The family treasure the videos they have of life before the war did such harm. Sedra's sister remembers when things were very different.
لوقت كانت أختي قبل ما يصير هالحادث كانت غير شيء، كانت هيك تحب وقت صار هيك الحادث تغيرت كتير. ما بعرف شنو بدي أقول لك، ما بعد تحسن تطلع على الشارع، تطلع على الشارع بس ما بتحب حدا يطلع هيك فيها.
Despite all that's changed, the photos of the past offer some respite. And a distraction from the bombs which tonight still fall around this family.
The desperate plight of people in Aleppo is underlined by the latest footage from inside the city. Filmed in rebel-held territory today, it shows how much damage the relentless bombing has caused. This was once a bustling housing block full of families. Now it's partially demolished after dozens of recent airstrikes. It's now mostly deserted, although incredibly some people still live inside. We've been collating the number of daily attacks and fatalities in Aleppo this week. On Wednesday alone, there were 11 airstrikes on Aleppo and 8 deaths, most of them civilians. And Emma joins us live now in the studio. All this week you've been telling, as you just did, the stories, terrible stories of these children. Do you have any update on any of those that you've looked at over this week?
Indeed we do. Sadly, at least one of the children that we featured this week did lose her life shortly after the report went out. But we have some slightly better news relating to one of the young girls who we featured earlier in the week. We didn't know her name. The doctors thought she'd been orphaned in an airstrike and she was lying in the bed with terrible head injuries. We now know that her family, after the chaos of the strike had subsided, did find her in the hospital. Her name is Jodie. She had serious head injuries and has been operated on, but she has been able to go home, although let's be clear, the reason she's gone home is because the hospitals are under attack and there's no real safe place for her. So a little bit of better news there, but that young girl, as with so many other children there, does have a long, long road ahead of her.
Indeed. Emma, thank you. And you can watch our reports and specially written accounts on Aleppo Under Siege on our website, itv.com/news.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, the gambling ads that could be banned from daytime TV, and
Gordon's alive?
Brian Blessed reveals the Queen is a fan of Flash Gordon.
Would you mind saying Gordon's alive to all the grandchildren? So I did say, Gordon's alive! I said, thank you so much.
That fabulous story and the rest of the day's news right after this short break.
Welcome back. The former boss of a troubled mental health trust has been criticised for taking a massive payoff after leaving her latest role. Katrina Percy faced calls to resign following hundreds of deaths at the Southern Health Trust. She eventually stepped down, but then went into a new job at the same organisation. Well, Rebecca Barry is here. Explain the controversy then over this payoff.
Well, Katrina Percy was under pressure to resign because of Southern Health's failure to properly investigate hundreds of deaths. In the summer, she did step down as the chief executive, but she went straight into a new role at the same NHS trust on the same salary. Now, following ongoing criticism, we're told that she has left altogether, but with a £190,000 payoff, the equivalent of a year's salary, and that has outraged relatives of those who died. And I spoke to the mother of Connor Sparrowhawk, a teenager who died in a bath having had an epileptic seizure at a care home run by Southern Health. She says that she's disgusted, that the payoff is obscene, and that it's scandalous that it's taken this long for her to leave. Meanwhile, the Trust says that it's listened to feedback and it now wants to focus on its primary objective, delivering the best possible care.
Rebecca Barry, thank you.
Former BBC DJ Chris Denning has been jailed for 13 years after he admitted he abused boys as young as 8. The court heard how Denning, who was one of the Radio 1 founding presenters, used his fame to groom and then sexually assault dozens of children.
ITV News understands that the government is seriously considering banning gambling adverts during daytime TV. It follows concerns of a rise in problem gambling among young people.
Some adverts, such as those for bingo, are allowed before the 9 p.m. watershed, but there are calls for that to be tightened, as our consumer editor Chris Choi reports.
Join in the party today!
TV ads like these can make the jackpots tempting in an era where the bingo hall and betting shop comes to you.
Chances to win prizes every day.
Now, government is expected to start a new review into how gambling is advertised.
And I gamble responsibly.
Some think change is already overdue. Justin Larkham had a costly betting addiction, eventually losing hundreds of thousands of pounds.
The adverts look so fun, don't they? It's a handsome guy with his mates, maybe his girlfriend. They always manage to cash out at just the right time and make money.
Already, the industry's code bans TV adverts for gambling before 9 p.m. But there are exceptions. Bingo and some sports betting is still permitted before the watershed. And there's concern that problem gambling in 18 to 24-year-olds has trebled in 3 years.
Bingo!
The gambling industry says its adverts carry clear no under 18s wording, but anti-gambling campaigners want tighter rules.
It's about having that balance between, yes, you can have a free bet, but also maybe a message in there about risk. So that's what we'd like to see.
The excitement of winning is only part of the story of this industry, and if campaigners get their way in future, we'll see a lot less of it on TV. The firms behind those glossy adverts say they are already highly regulated and very responsible, but we've been told they will face a new review. So far, there are no details of its timescale or scope. It comes as the industry is booming. There are 350 online bingo sites operating in the UK alone, with some surging questions now about whether regulations are really keeping up.
Chris, thank you.
And we stay with the theme of booming because the voice of Brian Blessed echoed through Windsor Castle today as the Queen gave him an OBE for his acting and charity work. The 79-year-old's fame stretches across the generations for star roles in everything from Flash Gordon to King Lear via Peppa Pig.
After receiving his award, he said meeting Her Majesty made him beam with pride. He spoke very loudly to our reporter, Sally Lockwood.
Brian Blessed's booming voice bounced off the walls of Windsor Castle after a rather more hushed meeting with the Queen inside.
Mr. Brian Blessed for services to the arts and to charity.
An OBE after more than 50 years in the business.
I mean, I'm cock-a-hoop. I mean, all those idiots who say they don't find it exciting, I do. It's absolutely marvellous.
And what did the Queen say to you?
Oh, well, she just said, I talked about my charity work and my mountaineering. I've met her several times. Of course I have.
It's not the first time you've spoken to the Queen.
Well, no.
Last year she did let on she was a fan of Flash Gordon.
Yes, she is a Flash Gordon, yes.
Remind us how that conversation went.
Well, would you mind saying Gordon's alive to all the grandchildren? So I did say, Gordon's alive! I said, thank you so much.
For those not familiar with Flash Gordon, Brian Blessed is perhaps best known for this.
Ming's not unbeatable. With all his men, he couldn't even kill Flash.
Gordon's alive?
He's played larger-than-life characters on stage and screen for decades. Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, just one of many.
Do not you meddle. Let me deal in this.
And he even featured as Grampy Rabbit in Peppa Pig.
Ah, yes, we do have a big dinosaur, a real whopper.
And that bellowing voice had no problem competing with the Heathrow flight path today.
My vocal cords are twice the size of normal vocal cords. So when I talk quietly, like that plane, get away! That's an aeroplane. But I think what's marvellous is that I'm the son of a coal miner from South Yorkshire. So if one can come here and get an award or get things like that, then that's what I love about Britain. Anything is possible.
When would you say you were at your happiest?
I'm happy all the time. I'm repeating myself here when I say I do get up in the morning, I do look in the mirror and I do see myself and I love myself. I know I look like a gorilla and I look like a yeti.
We love that.
But I've got the body of a gorilla and so forth. But I just love life.
And today, Brian Blessed OBE certainly deserves the final word.
Gordon's alive!
Sally Lockwood, ITV News, Windsor Castle.
Wow, and we love him.
We do indeed. News at 10's next, but from us, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.